Well, some of you said you looked forward to seeing the Schlosser picked, so that's what we're going to try to do now. We'll see what happens. I'm going to come in with a hard end of medium amount of tension, and that should prevent me from initially setting those first few pins, but that also means those lifts are going to be pretty difficult because pushing against a lot of tension on the lock. Let's do a reset. There's our little bit of a false. Come out and find. Okay. I'm going light tension now. I'm just let that thing back itself up, and we're in. So there we go, and here you can see our thing is not actually moved. Right? I mean, it moved because I moved to this piece, but our core is not actually rotating. Oh, I just relocked it. It's not actually rotating it. So yeah, what essentially though I ended up doing. Let me flip the camera. It'll be easier to show you. Okay, so we know if we tip off the first pin, we know this by just trial and error that we're in trouble, even though that first pin wants to set. So we use pretty hard tension, and that gets those first three pins hopefully pretty bound up. And then what you can do, and I'm going to hold, is you come in as low as you possibly can until you can get back there in the back. And then, like I said, we pick 4, then we pick 6, which gives us a slight counter rotation. And then we come 6 puts us into a little bit of a false. 5 gives us a little bit of counter rotation. When we're counter rotating though, we need all the room we can in here so we don't bump those 2 and 3 pins. So what I end up doing is, instead of picking off the ledge, I shift the pick just a tiny bit. I don't know. This is a hard thing to show. And what we're doing is almost just picking more from the space. But you can see if you stay close and if you get in there just right, you can kind of get some lift. So we're slightly twisted, and we're as close to the tip of that bit of warding as possible. And what I'm doing is I'm using my finger braced against the bottom of the lock there to kind of balance the pick, just pushing against that little ledge, but also kind of just hung out there in space a little bit. And if you do it just right, you can control that counter rotation coming around without tipping off pins 2 and 3, and the lock falls open. So there we go. Yeah, that's the pick on the Schlosser, which should have happened yesterday, but just wasn't happening for the video. So there we go, guys. Have a good one. So because that ran so short, I thought I would point out a few other things. Got a little bit extra time about this lock. First of all, even though I'm wearing the same shirt, this is the next day. I just put the same shirt on. So, and this was the second video attempt. The first video attempt ran about 4.5 minutes. I had about a dozen resets, and I decided, you know what, let me just reset the video and reshoot it. And then we pretty much nailed it in what you saw. Now, the reason I could do so many resets in so short of a time was just because the binding order is so simple, and you can tell, or at least I could tell because I've picked it so many times right away when I had it wrong. So I was just able to go, oh, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. Because I just kept hearing the same click of one of those first 3 pins over and over and over again. So that's how you just end up with so many resets. A few of you are maybe thinking too, oh, that's a really good idea. I'm going to use that for a challenge lock. And that is a good idea in a way. look at videos that give, you're looking for ideas on challenge locks, look at what gives, pickers problems and transfer those over into your challenge locks. It's not a bad idea. I will say though, a lot of what made this bidding, and for those of you that didn't watch the first video, that's the bidding, so tricky, is pretty much unique to this specific lock. We've got a few things going on. One is the warding that's going on in it, the binding order that they have to be bound in, and if you look, those 6 pins are all pretty close together, and they're close together and they kind of hit in a space that it just is that they're just perfectly aligned for the shank widening on most of your picks, accidentally tipping them off. So it's that kind of combination that comes together that made this one particularly difficult, if that makes any sense. Hopefully it does. And I'll also point out, in the wild, this would be a pain in the butt because, like I've said, that first pin wants to set all the time. And it feels like it's the first pin you want to set. And for a while, I chased circles on that. I would come in, you find a nice bind on that pin 1, click it, and you can go in. But what that's actually doing is it's freeing up, because once you set that first pin, you've exposed 2 and 3 pins to oversetting really easily after that. And I'm not sure if that makes any sense, but the first pin, if you don't pick it, that in combination with a higher tension and the fact you've got those 3 pins in there, that all gives it enough resistance that you can kind of start to manipulate a little bit without accidentally hitting 2 or 3. Right, so because you've just got a little bit extra force coming in from that first pin, and that all kind of works together in a way. I hope that kind of makes some sense there on why it has to be done that way. But if you were in the wild, you would probably just keep picking that first pin over and over and over again, and then going from there and trying it, and it just doesn't work. You've got to skip that first pin. And that's where I made my mistake. That also points out, if you find yourself on a lock that's giving you trouble and you are just doing the same thing over and over again, stop doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? Sometimes the first pin that binds is not the first pin in the binding order of things. It can kind of branch off a little bit. Of course, as those combinations narrow down, there get to be less and less options. That's how we end up with a binding order. But yeah, I mean, it would seem rather simple because you can still get into that false set picking that first pin. But then you're constantly oversetting 2 and 3 after that. There's almost no way around it. At least not that I found. So anyway, just a little bit more, a couple more minutes of detail on what's going on with this specific one. So let me just reiterate for those that missed the thing yesterday. This is not a difficult lock. I've picked other locks of this. It's just, this one was kind of interesting and unique because of that bidding and the binding order in combination with the warding and how it all goes together. So, all right, now have a good one.